You're listening to the Whip Appeal Show, hosted by MistressCandy69 from the BDSM Alive Radio Network. Hello there, you're listening to Mistress Candy69, hostess of the BDSM Alive Radio Network. Are you into kinky, dirty, fetishy type materials? If so, please have a listen to our wonderful network called BDSM Alive Radio Network. We have a bunch of mistresses teaching everybody on the network about all things kinky, dirty, sexy, society, and culture. Please listen to our network. We can be found on all the apps. Thank you and have a great week, everybody. Stay kinky, my friends. Here for the shows. I did have a Spunk Lube commercial. I'm not 100% sure where it is at the moment, but I do have a Spunk Lube commercial somewhere. So if you're interested in getting some lube, check them out. They're at spunklube.com. You can email them and tell them that Mistress Candy from the BDSM Alive Radio Network had sent you over to them. Like I said, they have great lubricant. It is silicone, hybrid. They have an all-natural edible one, which is made out of avocado and coconut oil. Their what do you call it? Their lubricant does not rot toys. I've heard of other people using different lubricants throughout the years, and it kind of like rots the rubber. But Spunk Lube does none of such, so that's kind of a good thing. One of the topics for tonight's show, I wanted to talk a little bit about feeties and foodies and feederism. Kind of an interesting subject, or believe it or not, it is a fetish for some men, right? So it's called a feederism. Hold on. It's kind of interesting. I do a Dear Mistress column for the show. People email me shit about, fetishes and want me to read stuff out loud on the internet or on the show. Somebody earlier this week had a mistress questions and answer and wanted to know a little bit about the feederism fetish. So feederism is a fat fetish subculture which individuals eroticize weight gain and feeding. Okay, for instance, feeders are the individuals who claim to become sexually aroused by feeding their partners and encouraging them to gain weight. So basically, most of the guys who are into feedyism or feeder, they get off sexually by watching large women stuff their faces, right? And they get off on, if it's a long-term thing, to see how fat the woman can get from eating food. So it's kind of interesting. Feedism is often of a fat fetishism. But the two kinks are not really attached at the hip. They can exist independently, right? So there could be a person who has a fetish for fat people, and then there are people who have the feedyism or the feederism, which is a different type of subculture of fat fetish. Feeders want to feed their partners, and the feedee, who's the woman that is eating or consuming the food, want to be fed. Gainers derive sexual pleasure from cultivating fat. So basically, it's the old saying, if you feed the cow too much, they're going to become an overweight cow, right? And I'm not saying this to be rude, but there are guys that address women as fat sow cows, and they want to feed them and nourish them and make them large so they can get off sexually from it. I mean, it's kind of an interesting scenario. When Mistress was younger, I had this friend who was into heavy-set women. He was into BBWs, right? And it was kind of funny. Me and a group of our other individual friends used to pick on him profusely, saying, wow, why do you want to be with heavy-set women? And you know what his answer was? He said, well, they call them BBWs for a reason. They're big, beautiful women. He goes, most of the time, regular guys want a skinny, regular-sized woman. He goes, and how I feel is chunky women need loving too, right? So this is what he would say. Chunky women need loving too. So basically, when they want loving too, they are basically catering themselves to heavy-set women. So then you have the guys who are into the BBWs who like to overfeed themselves. That is where the feederism comes from. These are the women that get so large sometimes just by eating like several meals that the fellas kind of feel they can get off sexually by feeding the woman and making her eat. Then if you do this in real life, there are fellas that actually will go on a date with a woman for, like, let's say there's a heavy dominatrix, right? And the guy is able to get his fat fetish just from, kind of talking and interacting with a heavy-set dominant. Then he takes her out to dinner, feeds her, like takes her to a very expensive restaurant and feeds, just basically watches her stuff her face. It also has something to do with an oral fixation, too. There are some guys who get off with the feederism fetish, feeding the women, making and watching them gain weight by overfeeding them. And then they also have a thing where, I just lost my train of thought for a hot minute. Overfeeding the women, feeding them, they then become aroused at watching the woman put food in their mouth also. So that's part of like the oral fixation thing. So it's kind of funny. Somebody emailed me during the week and told me that this was a woman. I'm not going to say her name because she wants to be anonymous. She was together with her boyfriend for a year, and she private message emailed me, told me that she found out that her boyfriend revealed to her that he has a feeding fetish, okay? So it's kind of interesting because she had said that, they would go out here and there and go to dinner, and he would say, "Oh, come on, eat this." And she'd be like, "No, I'm full. Like, I don't want to eat anymore." And he's like, "No, come on. I want to see you try this and eat this." So she couldn't figure it out. So she said for the past year, they've been together maybe like 13 months. And she said that, he had, was always forcing her to eat, and she couldn't figure out why. And then she said during this first 6 months of their relationship, she actually was gaining a lot of weight, and the boyfriend really liked her a little heavier. And then he had said to her, "I really, enjoy watching women eat food. Like, there's just something about it." So she kind of wasn't sure, like, if he had oral fixation, like she had asked me about it. And I said, well, it could be that he has an oral fixation, but I had explained to her that I really thought that he was a feedie, that he was into feederism. And she was telling me that recently he had admitted to her that he had a feeding fetish. And it was kind of interesting because she was like, I had just ordered takeout, inhaled it, and was lying on the floor next to the bed. She goes, anchored by pan-fried noodles and a colossal order of egg rolls. That's what she was telling me, that he had ordered like a whole bunch of food, like a whole Chinese buffet spread just for 2 people, like himself and her. And he expected her to eat like majority of it. And she was like, "But I don't understand, like, why you want me to eat all this food?" And he goes, "Well, I have a feeding fetish." And he goes, "I really get off on watching women eat and like stuff their face." So the woman asked me if this was normal. And I said, well, what is really normal if you think about it, right? So it's normal, but it's not. Think about it. Feeding is a nesting bowl within feedism, a sexual subculture that fetishizes overeating and weight gain, right? Feeders, which is the guy, her boyfriend, wants to feed their partners, and the feedies want to be fed. So now in this situation, her boyfriend is the feeder. He is trying to turn her into a feedee, but she's not into it. So she's like, he makes me gain weight, and, he's so fixated about going to dinner all the time and wants to feed me. She goes, and, I don't know what to do about it. And I said, well, basically, I said, it sounds like you're feeding too much into this, like, to be funny, hello, LOL, no pun intended. Like, she's feeding too much into his feederism fetish. So I told her, I said, well, you know what you should do? You should let him go on phone sex sites and let him feed chunky women so he gets off. And she goes, yeah, but it's considered like, I don't know. And I said, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you guys decide to go to a restaurant together and sit together and possibly like, get, I don't know, maybe go on like a BBW site.